strange cases. A million ways to fall in love with all of the mistakes. It's a perfect place to keep up with the pace and navigate a maze meticulously engineered to make a payday. Hey, hey, who are you? What's your deal? What you coming to take? Are you for real?
Well, hello, Ray, and welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Well, thank you for coming on. I know you've heard of the Short Round podcast. No, you haven't.
Yep.
No, the podcast hasn't came out yet. I'm just getting my ducks lined up in a row, getting some good interviews. And
Nice.
I'm going to have to say, everybody at my gym was 100% excited to hear that you was going to be on.
Well, good to hear. Thank you.
Yeah. As soon as I sit there and said Sugarfoot, they're like, "Oh, legend." That's everybody. All of my coaches, they's like, "That's a legend. One heck of a
Appreciate
kickboxer."
it. Thank you so much. Where are you based?
What's up?
Where are you based?
I'm in Springfield, Oregon.
Okay, got it.
Yep. And you're what, out of Las Vegas, Nevada? Yep.
Yes.
All right. So, Ray, I don't want to take up a whole lot of your time. I know you're way more busier than I am. I'm just a stay-at-home dad that does podcast on the side. You got people to train. You've got businesses to run. So, really, what the short round podcast is about, I want to get people to know martial artists. I would like them to. It's always the same three questions: how and why you got into martial arts, what's martial arts doing in your life now, and then what's your plans for martial arts in the future. So if we can touch on the first one, how did you get into martial arts and like what style you got in? Just give me the whole rundown on, I guess you was smaller. I guess you was a younger person when you started. So you might have not been a sugar foot. You might have been a sugar cube.
It could have been.
Please give me the rundown on that.
Yeah, so I come from a boxing background. My father, my grandfather, my uncles, cousins, everybody boxed in our family. And so at the age of 5, myself and my brothers, obviously I have 7 brothers and some were older. But at the age of 5, I got my first boxing gloves from my dad. And that's when I started, pretty much moving around with him. Taught me how to box a little bit here and there. And then at the age of 7, he was the one that introduced me to martial arts because he rented a movie, Jackie Chan movie was Drunken Master, and Fist of Fury with Bruce Lee. And so I was like, Dad, why do I want to be able to do what they're doing? So I was so blown away how they were throwing kicks and, using their head, like they were using every part of their body. And so that was intriguing to me. And so by the age of 12, while I was still at school, I was a milk boy. I would deliver milk. And so that's how I paid for my martial arts lessons. And a friend of mine was doing Wing Chun, and so I went along with him, and that was the beginning of martial arts for me. So I did Wing Chun for 6 years, and then I switched from Wing Chun to Muay Thai, and then obviously the rest is history. By 2000, or it might have been a little bit before that. My first introduction to jiu-jitsu was with Royce Gracie, who is a good friend of mine. And that we were both in Japan. And so that was my first introduction to jiu-jitsu. And then my first introduction to wrestling was when Randy Couture opened the gym, and we all, so when the gym started, that was my introduction to wrestling. And, I thought, okay, I could use my striking and keep them away. A friend of mine who is a stuntman actor now, retired world champion as well, fighter, Jay Haran. Jay walks around at probably about 185, 190, and he shot in, took me down, and I couldn't believe how heavy he was. So I dedicated a year of my time to wrestling. I would wrestle 3 times a week for a year straight because I wanted to learn the actual art of wrestling. And of course, you know, I would do jiu-jitsu here and there with Vinny Margules and Ronnie Marks, who are good friends and teammates of mine as well. So, and both black belts. And that, you know, so and the rest of my journey as a martial artist is, you know, but those are the times that I was able to do certain parts of the arts, and which I thoroughly enjoy.
Ray, let me ask you a question. What was your first experience like when you was walking into the dojo, and how old was you when you said you was about 12?
Correct. Yes.
And how was that? Explain that. Was you worried? Was you frightened? Because the reason why I'm gonna bring this up is because yesterday my 4.5-year-old went and done her first. It's called
nice.
Little Ninjas. Yeah, Little Ninjas at the gym that we're at, and you know, she was crying at first. All right, because one, she's never been around a lot of kids.
Right.
And I had to walk her out on the mat. And it was funny. Like, she was holding my hand. I'm like, listen. And then my coach, he's 6'8" and 300 pounds. So like, he's big anyways. I'm
That's a big man.
Yeah, I'm 6'5" and 470. So So you know, so she was a little intimidated, but it was like one of those things. She was holding my hand at first, and then he started doing the warm-ups, and then I was able to slowly walk away and actually, instead of coaching with them, because I help a lot with the gym, I was able to go and sit and be a dad and watch her. So what was it like when you first walked in, you know, for the first time? I mean, being 12 and, you know, 4.5 is totally two different things, but still a young man at the age of 12.
That's right. I was more excited, a little nervous, but I was excited because I wanted to see what it was like, you know. And I think I keep going back to the 70-year-old that was watching these movies going, I want to do that. You know what I mean? So I was excited, but, you know, a little nervous also. But once the coach, you know, told us to warm up and get in line and whatnot, then it was just a walk in the park. Of course, in the way that I felt, it was I felt comfortable there, and I felt excited about learning something different and something new.
Yeah. So as you can sit there, it was new for you, but also it seems like you know, fighting and stuff was kind of intertwined with your family anyways.
Right.
And I had a best friend, Dave, and I haven't talked to him for years just because this was like really pre, you know, internet things and stuff like that. I mean, Facebook and stuff was around, but it wasn't as big, and we've lost touch. And he was from New Zealand. Wow. Oh yeah, trust me. And he was a really good friend of mine. And trust me, he's like, me and him like didn't box or anything together, but he would always sit there and you know, talk to me. And he had a heavy New Zealand accent. He's always, I would just like to know what it feels like to get punched in the face by you. I'm like, why? Because just because I want to see. And I'm like, nah, that ain't gonna happen. So you really wasn't too nervous. It was probably more nervous of starting something different. Right. Not the act of combat.
Correct.
Yeah. You know, and so you done that for a while. Then what did you stay with that style, or did you switch into when you switched into Muay Thai? How was that? Because that's, you know, they're really two different things. Yes, they're both combat sports or martial art, self-defense kind of things, but you know, they're opposite. You know, that'd be like rugby and football. There's somewhat similar, but totally two different things.
Exactly.
So how was that stepping into a Muay Thai gym?
It was, I mean, it definitely obviously was different to doing Wing Chun. But I felt right away, I felt at home. And you listen, kids don't do this out there. But I felt every time I got into a street fight, I was fighting like a kickboxer. And maybe part of that was because, learning how to use my hands as a boxer came natural to me rather than standing in a Wing Chun stance, if you will. That being said, I love Wing Chun, you know what I mean? But yeah, I found it home right away. And when I got to actually spar also, I was like, oh, this is exactly what I want to do. You know what I mean?
Yeah, you was like totally different kind of things now, boy,
right.
when it comes to sparring like that. Because I understand
exactly.
what you're saying there is because like I've been around martial arts, pretty much all my life, but actually not going into a dojo and studying styles and stuff like that up until like almost 5 years ago. And I went into Shotokan karate. And then yeah, and it was great and I loved it. And once the pandemic hit, the dojo where I was at, the sensei there, she had a lot of health problems. So she was kind of like shutting down almost and doing most things that, on Zoom and things, which is an awesome thing. But then I started going to a gym right down the street and it's, an MMA gym, but heavy on Muay Thai and Jiu-Jitsu. Right. And once I started with that whole Muay Thai, I was like, yeah, this is kind of fun, and I also wanted, when I got into it, I really wanted to do it for self-defense.
Exactly.
In Muay Thai, I cannot sit there and talk good enough about how Muay Thai, is a good self-defense. So explain, you get in there, you're noticing the difference between the styles now.
Right.
And is that where it clicks in your head of what you want to do as a profession in your life, or was that already kind of in gears for you?
Yeah, no, I was just loving the training. I actually never wanted to fight. I mean, up to that point of actually fighting, fighting was never a thought in my head.
Can I ask you real quick, what did you want to do?
What did you want to be? A cop.
Okay.
Yeah, I wanted to be a cop. And so fighting wasn't even in that process. Like it wasn't even a thought. But loved training, loved learning, loved martial arts. And it wasn't until I was 18 when actually a guy challenged me to a fight. And how that came about. So we go to a weigh-in and one of my teammates was supposed to fight him. And he was diagnosed with asthma. And so he wasn't allowed to fight. So this guy challenged me to fight. And I didn't understand why, because I never fought I fought a lot of times, but I actually didn't really, I never fought in the ring or anything like that. And it wasn't until years later that I realized why he challenged me to a fight. It was because I was already on national television modeling and things like that. And so I started modeling when I was 16, I think it was. And so I don't want to say I was a household name, but people would recognize me from time to time. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And one thing, like New Zealand, it's not really that big of a country. Am I correct?
No, it's not a big country at all. I mean, at that point in time, I think we only had 3.5 million in the whole country.
Oh, wow. That's like Miami, maybe.
Yeah, exactly. You know what I mean?
So let me ask you this. One, all right, we're going to have to go back to this, but when I was sitting there just looking around on stuff, I don't really like to, I know a lot about you, but when I don't like to look up a bunch of stuff about people before I do a podcast with them, because I want to learn. I don't want to just sit there and know what the answer is going to be, right? But I did see a magazine cover with you, and he was kind of like this. He's kind of looking on it like this. So I was going to have to ask you about that. And it's good that you're going to sit there and talk about it. So you was doing modeling. So this guy's like, hey, let me call you out because you do have somewhat of a name, and maybe he didn't put 2 to 2 together that you actually could fight.
Right. And I think the other part of that story too was because I was I want to say 18 and a half, 18, yeah. I actually worked as a bouncer. I actually, don't do this at home, kids, but I lied about my age. I said I was 21. And at the time, I think I was 18 and a half. And so, and this dude was also a bouncer in the city at a different club. And so, there was a mixture of that as well as being a model. So I think that's how that kind of came about. You know what I mean? And
so it wasn't just that you was a good-looking young man, that was on some magazines and people knew you were. It's also that you had a little bouncer door beef going on, huh?
Right. But yeah, that magazine I think was that was my first cover for a magazine, and that came after I won my first world title, which was the light heavyweight Muay Thai title, which I won back in '92.
So you used them both at the same time? You still being a model and fighting at the same time?
Absolutely. It's funny, every time we did a runway show, my manager would be like, "You can't believe that this guy is actually a world champion. He's a model, but he's a world champion kickboxer." So it was always funny, and people were like, "Oh, that's right," So I was just, so I was doing both at the same time. I think I did modeling for like 10 years. Then eventually, when I signed to K-1,
what great cross promotion. Hey ladies, come here and check out Ray. He's going to be walking down the runway. Hey guys, come and check out Ray. He's also a Muay Thai fighter.
Yeah, it was, it was best of both worlds, if you will.
So let me ask you this: How did that fight turn out?
I dropped him in the second round, and I went on. He survived, went the distance, but I beat him. And the fun thing is with that fight too was because I think his record was 5-2 or something like that. That was my first fight, and when I walked out, I got booed.
Why?
Because I guess I was the new kid on the block.
You can definitely see that. Yeah, you can see that.
Yeah, and he outweighed me by, I want to say, 20 pounds, maybe 25. And he was 6'3", 6'4". But yeah, when I dropped him with the overhand right, he didn't want to engage anymore. But when the fight first started, he came out like a bull. And of course, I'm the type of guy that don't like taking a back step. So we just went at it. But yeah, anyway, after I won the fight, I got cheered. Everybody, I had a standing ovation, which was, it was completely, I had never experienced that before. But it was a good experience because I was like, okay, now I got to really do something because they're booing me. And then when I won, they were cheering me. I'm like, oh, okay, maybe this is something I could do. Now, it wasn't until I had won my third world title that I realized that this was going to be a career.
Now you've won what was it? Is it 6 or 10? Six world titles. Okay, yes. 6 world titles.
Let me see: Sub-Pacific, Australasian, National. I think I won about 10 titles altogether, but 6 world titles.
6 world titles. Well, I mean, you didn't win 10, but I mean, come on, you got 6. I mean, we'll give you some credit on that.
I tell you what, it was more than I had ever expected.
So, usually I ask this, but you don't even have to go into this because obviously usually I ask people, what was your family did they want you to fight or not? But obviously, you know, you coming from a family background of fighters, was mom on with you doing it too, or was mom kind of like, go be a cop?
No, she was the feisty one. Honestly, when I fought for the national title, amateur, I think by the third, fourth round, I was like tired, and then I was on the ropes, and the guys like just going at it, and I'm, you know, kind of rope-a-doping a little bit, buying some time. My mom gets up because she's sitting ringside and slaps the ring, like, yeah, she's hammering the ring like, come on, Ray, let's go. And needless to say, after the fight, when I won, we were at dinner. I'm like, Mom, if you ever do that again, you'll never come into a fight again.
It's usually the opposite, right? Like mom's like, don't get hurt.
Right, right.
So explain to me, because how many Muay Thai fights did you have, and then you went into K-1?
So as a pro, I think I was 22-0 with 5 world titles going into K-1. And then I won my 6th world title in K-1, and 4 amateurs. So 25, 26 Muay Thai fights.
Wow. That's a pretty good, impressive record. Because right now you're around what? You've had 100 fights?
110.
110? Wow.
Yeah. And so 110 pro and 4 amateurs.
Okay. So let me ask you this. How was it going into K-1? Because there's a slight difference in between a Muay Thai fight and a K-1 fight, right?
Right.
Is there elbows allowed in K-1? I can't remember.
Yeah, no elbows.
No elbows.
Yeah.
And how was that transitioning into that? I mean, because really it does take away two parts of your arsenal. I mean,
right. I use elbows in fights, but I ended up, most fights, I ended up hitting them with my hands before I could even use my elbows. And so, it wasn't too big of a change, if you will. But it was, the fact that it was funny though, because about a year and a half to 2 years, me watching my first K-1 show and going, wow. And I think at that time it was at the Osaka Dome, which was 40,000 people. And they were introducing Peter Aerts, Andy Hook, Ernesto Hoost, Mike Bernardo, Jerome Le Banner. The list goes on. And I was sitting there going, wow, I want to be one of those guys one day. And then 2 years later, a year and a half to 2 years later, I was one of those guys. And it was just an amazing feeling, because, they were the elite of the elite, if you will. And you know what I mean? And so, even though I had won these 5 world titles, I wanted to chase the next big thing, and that was it. And so it was a truly amazing feeling when I not only signed with them, but also ended up competing against these amazing fighters from all over the world.
Yeah, you can definitely, there's a thing where some people want to get to a certain point, and they want to stay at that level. Then you have people like you, and I'm not sitting there saying everybody wants to stay at the same level, but some people get into that comfort zone, but you wanted to take it to the next level.
Right.
And you've also, how many different weight classes have you fought in?
6. So the 6 world titles are all, it was light heavy, light cruiser, cruiserweight, heavy, and super heavyweight.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I can give you some credit on that. I mean, 6 world titles, 6 different weight classes. I mean, all right. I mean, I can see why some people call you a legend and whatnot. I mean, so That's just like me. I'm not even comparing, your 6 world titles or your 6 world, but your 10 titles. To me, even looking back on my the podcast that I've done, when I first started back doing podcasts, they're nowhere near as good as, because I started getting back into my groove, because when I first started doing them, I wanted to try to be a little bit more professional, and it was fun, and the guests were having fun, but then I was like, I can be more myself and joke around and still have fun. And then I kind of got into the groove, matter of fact, a buddy of mine down in West Palm Beach, Florida, Josh Cohen, in the home team, also Dean Thomas is a co-host on there. And I asked him, I said, I asked him the question, what do I do? Do I stay professional or, just be myself and be professional as myself? He goes, 100% always be professional as yourself. Right. He goes, that's where you're going to get the best stuff from. So you wanted to exceed up. I don't even know why I put my hand up that high, because you can't even see it. Yeah. I like to do stuff with my hands where nobody can see it, and I don't even know why I'm doing it. But so you wanted to exceed to the next level. What was the next level after you got to that plateau, where you're sitting there saying, I want to be with those names?
Right.
Where did you go? Where did your travels take you?
So K-1 was based out of Japan. So, getting signed to Japan. Most fights were in Japan, but also in 2000, K-1 started to travel the world because they were also having World Grand Prix nationals. For example, K-1 USA, K-1 Japan, K-1 New Zealand, Australia, Germany, Holland, you name it. And so every now and then we would super fight at a different country. But majority of the actual shows or fights of the big shows were held in Japan throughout the country. And that was nice too, because we got to travel, around Japan and whatnot. And you get to see the different places. I mean, I guess it's the same as in the US, where you could go from California to Miami is a completely kind of different scene.
Yeah, totally different. Yeah. Or you go to here in Oregon.
Right. Yeah.
End up in the middle of Missouri somewhere. Totally two different kind of things. Yeah. So like professional wise, and I probably should have put professional wise when I asked that. Like professional wise, what was the next level for you? Where did you want to take your career from there to the next level?
Well, that next level was K-1, and just the fact that, I mean, there's not many people that can say that they've fought the best of the best. The fact that I was able to face off with an Mister who's, I think, 4 times, the same with Peter Aerts, Jerome Le Banner, Mike Bernardo, like the list goes on. Peter Aerts, Francisco Fido, Glover, like all these guys that have not only competed, not only have won, because at that time when I got signed, you had to be in a world champion to get signed to K-1. It wasn't until they actually started doing, back in 2000, they started doing the K-1 Grand Prix around the world, nationals, that certain fighters were able to go in there, and if they won the actual nationals Grand Prix, then they had the opportunity to be in the top 16, to qualify to get into the Grand Prix, where you fought 3 times in one night.
Oh, so you guys are doing tournament fights. And did that also, when you're not just in like one country and stuff, and now you're getting spread out, did that get you more, get your name out there more throughout the, the world, or was you making a name for yourself in the whole K-1 district anyways?
Yeah, I'm trying to remember exactly when it was. It might have been 99 or 2000, where I went to Croatia for the first time. Unbeknownst to me, that K-1 was actually in 135, 140 countries around the world. unbeknownst to me, that when we walked down and, we were in Zagreb, Croatia, and people were coming up to me asking for autographs and whatnot. And that's when I knew I knew K-1 was massive, but I didn't realize how big it was until that happened. And then when I asked around about it, K-1 was on Eurosport at least 2 times a week. So we're in front of these people every, twice a week. It's amazing. And so, I went to India one time, and I'm walking through a market, and people came up and said, "Excuse me, you're Ray Sefo? What are you doing here?" You know what I mean? This is in it was in New Delhi, and so it just told me how big K-1 was.
And how much did that blow your mind, having somebody come up here and do that?
Yeah, no, it really did. It really did. It completely, it's more than I had ever expected, and even to be in India and be noticed, it's mind blowing.